Alright folks, so welcome to Billings Farm at Home. Doing fun at home. We are going to dye today. By that I mean D-Y-E, as in change the color of some yarn specifically. So we are going to change this natural yarn, natural means whatever color the sheep was, we're going to change it to a red. Now you'll notice I'm not wearing my nicest pants. I am wearing pants that actually regularly do this in, and as you can tell I also paint in. Because when you dye, you are trying to make the color stick. You don't want to wear something that you want to stay the same color. You have to expect that it might change. So I've got my yarn. It's actually soaking right now to make sure that it's nice and wet and ready for the dye bath. This is my dye bath. Right now it's just got water in it, but we're going to add a little bit. So RIT dye is a good one. It's generally available all around. And it's a pretty easy one to use. There are many different dyes in the world, but this is a pretty good one. RIT dye goes a long way, and I don't have all that much yarn to dye. There's actually a ball inside of this to make sure that it's loose. So I'm not going to dye that much yarn, so I don't need much dye. So I'm going to add just a very little bit, because you can always add more dye, but you cannot take it away. Then, to just sort of help it along, I add 1 drop of dish soap. That sort of opens up the color a bit, which is pretty nifty. And then, I'm going to work with very specific terms here, very specific measurements. I'm going to add a glug of vinegar. Vinegar helps the dye stay. It's called color fasting, and it's very important if you want the color to stay in whatever you're dyeing. If you've ever, seen the old joke about one red sock in with the whites makes everything pink, that's because it wasn't color fasted, and so the color was bleeding. So today I'm going to do, instead of one solid color, I'm going to do what's called an ombre or a faded, and I'm going to do that by changing the amount of time spent in the dye bath. So I'm going to put some of my yarn in, and I'm going to leave it for a little while and let that absorb the dye. Then I'll add more to it, and because each time I add, it will have spent less time in the dye bath, it won't be as dark. So we're going to watch that happen, and I'll keep it going, but I'll make it go fast for you. We'll see what color we end up with. So now my dyeing is done. I didn't measure off the sections exactly, but that's certainly possible. But you can sort of see I grabbed the clumps of how long they've been in there when I added them. And so now these are done. They're as dyed as I want them to be. And some of them don't have too much variation, but if we put it in a line, you'll probably see more. Now, to make sure that this is color fasted and not going to run, I am going to move it over to the other pot that had just water in it. And now I'm going to add a bunch of vinegar to it. Really make sure. And then move it back into that pot so that it can set. It can get completely color fasted. So sort of squeezing out any dye as I do this, because I don't want any dye to come into my other pot. Although I will rinse this the yarn a few times before I trust that it is actually color fasted. I'll rinse it with hot water, rinse it with cold water, just to make sure, because it's no fun with yarn to end up knitting with something that the color comes off on your fingers, or if any of you have ever worn something where the color came off on your skin, oh, that's no fun. So we want to make sure that it is completely color fasted. You might have noticed that my dye pot still has dye in it. I'm going to take some just plain wool that can be used later to soak up the rest of that dye. I don't want to waste any of it. And like I mentioned before, RIT dye goes a long way, so I'll probably get a lot of colored wool out of that. And I can show you that in a little while. But once this is all color fasted, and I'll skein it up so that you can really see the colors. At least that's the hope. One cool thing about dyeing is, even though yes, it can be very scientific and you can have all the formulas and the exact measures, there's always a sense of adventure and unknown. There are a number of variables, so it is both a science in that you can measure it, but it's also a bit of an art, because you can't always exactly replicate things, and sometimes you just have to jump in and give it a try and see what you get. I will show you what we get in a little while. Here it is. We've got our finished yarn right here, and honestly, it turned out how I was hoping it would, how I was expecting it to. Isn't it beautiful? So we can see here the darker strands, those were in the dye bath for longer, and then as you continue along, as it gets lighter and lighter, those were in the dye bath for less time, and these natural strands over here weren't in the dye bath at all. We kept them out of the coloring, and so you can see how it just progresses from lighter to darker. Dyeing's a lot of fun, and it's kind of like magic, especially when it works out the way you wanted, if you had a goal in mind. So whatever it becomes will be pretty amazing, and I promise to show you whatever I end up making with it. Thanks for watching.